Well, here we go, folks. Vstrom 1000 XT. Final test. Number 4. The number 1 was the R1200GS. Number 2 was the R1200RT. Before lunch today was the Vstrom 650 XT. And here we have the 1000 XT. My week of the 4 bikes. Going to make a decision. Which one's it going to be? So for me, I think already I've discarded the BMW R1200GS. I think probably for me this Suzuki would do everything that the GS can do. I wouldn't be thinking about doing any more than this, so this would do it a lot cheaper, I think. So on the road now you can sort of pick these up in the UK for around about 8.5k. You've probably got to spend £1,500, £2,000, something like that to equip it. So immediately the feel of this is more solid. I suppose that just is a function of its extra weight. I'll be interested to see how this compares in today's sort of slight crossbreeds, really, just to see whatever difference that makes. But I've deliberately chosen a route with some twists and turns on it. We got a bit more dual carriageway as well today, so this is going to be a slightly longer ride. We'll see how we get on. But again, it feels very, very comfortable, I have to say. It's again, you get that sense of being supported in the small of your back. The seat, I guess, is more or less identical to the 650. So already I know the wind buffeting is less on this bike. I've put the screen into position 2, which you can just do very simply, just by pushing it. It's on a simple ratchet system. It takes about 5 seconds. So this route I'm going down today from Suzuki at Daventry, twists and turns, ups and downs. So the question against this bike is its agility, really, handleability, flickability, user friendliness in these sort of smaller roads. Well, presumably there's going to be no lack of power here. Feels a little more planted. Again, that's obviously just the weight. And what you get when you buy one of these over the 650 XT is you get the lean sensitive traction control. I think it's the Bosch system, and also a slipper clutch, which, as I understand it, means you get less severe engine braking when you're changing down. Proper biker's road, this. Not the best surface, but again the bike feels very very planted. Nice and dry this afternoon. So you're probably looking, I would imagine, around about £1,500 more for this bike in the UK at the moment. And as I've mentioned on previous videos, the Suzuki Vstrom 1000 XT can, I guess with the exception of the off-road stuff, can do everything a GS can. BMW 1200GS. But on top of the purchase price, you're going to spend some money putting panniers, top boxes, a navigation system, communications. If I did buy this bike, I would certainly want extra lights front and rear. Get some LEDs. Wouldn't be taking it out at night at much, but certainly during the day I'd want that extra frontal visibility. And I think there is a company called Admore in Canada which will provide a kit to put additional lighting in the top box and panniers. If you do both of those, you're looking £500 or £600, but maybe one of those might be a couple £100 well spent. And it replicates your brake light indicators and day riding lights. Just gives an extra level of light to anyone from the back. Looks like we're following a truck full of potatoes here. Make a lot of chips out of that. And French fries for our American cousins. So low speed, second gear. This sort of judders a little bit. Maybe I should be in first. No challenge for this bike overtaking a tractor, but achieved very easily. Whether it's just me, but the throttle feels quite sharp. It's probably just my lack of practice. It's just as though hills don't exist riding this. I think having the bigger engine here as well, I guess you've got two 500cc pots set up in a V-twin here, so you can sort of very much feel the sort of thump of the engine. Not that you particularly, again, I've got to say I'm less conscious of the noise of this engine and the vibration of it than I was of the engine on the BMW R1200GS. Screen does a much better job on the 1000 than it does on the 650. Nice friendly wave there. Well, again, loads of power on this. So about a mile from this village here is, if you've seen BBC's adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, Colin Firth and co. And Netherfield House, about a mile away. Just over the back of that church we can see in front of us. So most people park up by the church and you can walk through. Yeah, so this bike, it's I guess the test today is just how it feels around lanes exactly like this. This is probably where these are the kind of lanes I probably do the majority of my riding on, not the dual carriageways or motorways. So it's got to be fun, enjoyable, not too big. Lovely growl from this engine when you wind it up. Not that I've wound it up much. So it's essentially this afternoon it's a question of, I think, the 1000 versus the 650 Vstrom, and because I've already relegated the R1200GS, then I guess it's a head-to-head between this and the BMW 1200 RT. So the 1200 RT Might be unfair, but it's certainly smoother than this. But of course there's a massive price difference. Well, not massive, but probably best part of £2,000 I would think. Again, you'd love to be able to accelerate hard around these bends, but with the vanishing point being so near to you, and me being such a green rider, coming back to the bike after all these years, I'll take it very easy. So to me on this bike, the throttle feels what I would call more digital. Just the bike seems to react by jumping forward or sitting back with just the slightest handful of throttle, whereas the 650 was more forgiving than that. I guess that's a function of a big V-twin. Again, not that I'm an expert. The power on this is absolutely superb. And the road surface here isn't great and the bike's just eating it up. Again, you're in a very strong, commanding riding position, very comfortable. Say maybe on reflection the seat on this is marginally less comfortable than the 650. Again, a YouTube apology to anybody following me today. Taking it very easy, very gingerly. Probably not riding with any great rhythm. Just being very cautious. Lovely big mirrors on this, you can see a lot behind you. I should have mentioned that on the 650 test as well, the same mirrors. You can just see a little bit of your elbows, but essentially there's no doubt what's behind. And I suspect handling wise, once I got used to the extra weight of this and probably got used to that more sensitive throttle, just as a function of the power, then I think this would probably trump the 650 XT. Going 70, national speed limit here, and this screen's actually doing a pretty good job with the buffeting. So it wouldn't be something you'd have to change straight away, I don't think. I don't know, I'm not an expert again, but I presume the reason there is a slipper clutch on this bike is because the engine braking, I suspect, would be quite strong changing down. With the engine braking, you don't actually need to brake very often. Well, I can imagine on a motorway 70 miles an hour, we're loping up some long Scottish passes. This just takes everything in its stride. Even more so than the 650. And eventually this road should bring us out more or less next to Silverstone. The Banbury to Silverstone Road. The B4525. I would say actually the engine on this doesn't feel as smooth at these speeds. The engine doesn't feel as smooth as the 650. I'd say you could quite feel every input and output of these two 500cc cylinders, pistons. But you're aware that they're there. Let's put it that way. Not intrusive. I would say the BMW R1200RT is, in terms of easiness to ride, marginally easier. In terms of smoothness, I'd say it was considerably smoother than this. In terms of cocooning you for in the environment, obviously you've got the big fairing there that you can control electronically. So yeah, it's obviously ahead. But then you're paying for that. Not just in the extra couple of £1,000 to buy a, let's say, a second-hand 2-year-old new version, but also, let's say, £300, £400, £500 extra a year, insurance, servicing, maintenance. This is a very nice machine though. I can see that Suzuki are going to sell a lot of Vstroms. So good time to give Libby a shout out. Bikers World Daventry, very friendly, make your cup of tea, have a chat. They do all the Jivvy equipment. You may or may not know the factory, the Jivvy distribution outlet is just around the back at Daventry. So they've got a very good relationship with those people. Seems a thoroughly friendly, pleasant place to do business. So thanks Libby and thank you Suzuki, thank you Bikers World Daventry. This seat definitely isn't as comfortable as on the 650. I wouldn't say I'm feeling uncomfortable, but I can certainly feel that I am sitting on the seat now. Approaching the Silverstone roundabout now. I guess many of you will recognise this if you've ever come to the various Grand Prix. Well, I'm certainly aware this bike has 2 cylinders, number 1 and number 2. Caught up between an Audi, a BMW and a Mercedes. Obviously having a bit of fun with each other. So I took you down one Roman road this morning, so now we're entering on 2nd Roman road onto the A5, Watling Street. At least 2,000 years old. Predates the Romans. We start to return now back to Bikers World. A few miles to go yet. Just trying to find the sweet spot for this engine, i.e. what I mean by that is the optimum speed of reasonable progress versus vibration. Because if you change up into 6 at say 60 miles an hour, again you can feel the 2 pots banging into each other. 5th, a little bit less so. 4th is probably about right. Oh, I could live with that. 60 miles an hour, 6th gear. I think obviously the difference with the between this and the 1200 RT is that 60 miles an hour you're hardly aware of the engine at all on the BMW, whereas here you are, it is there. I.e. feel, not so much sound, but feel. There is a vibration. Not unpleasant, I have to say, but again, over a long distance, it's a fatigue factor. Is this pointing me towards the RT? Yeah, this is going to cost probably £1,500 more than the 650 XT, for which you get 350 more cc's, you get 100 brake horsepower, you get the lean sensitive traction control, and you get the slipper clutch. That's on the plus side. So pluses over the 650. Well, there's certainly more power, obviously. It feels slightly more planted. I guess that's a function of the weight. So the wind hasn't changed speed at all today, or direction, and this bike basically shrugs it off. I think the stock screen as well is better in the wind than the XT. Again, that could be changed. Seem to be attracting my fair share of BMWs today. Sales execs in a hurry. Yeah, negatives on the 1000 XT. Certainly I'm more aware of vibration. Over the short distances, I would say that's not going to be a problem. Over the longer distance, really long distances, you know, the big tours, Scotland, Lake District, all those other places I quite fancy going. I guess that eventually would be more of a fatigue factor. So price, obviously another 1,500 quid. I think MPG is more or less the same as the XT. I would say in terms of handling, an experienced rider, I mean, I'm not an experienced rider, but an experienced rider isn't going to have any problem throwing this around the bends. And as an alternative to a GS, I think if you're in the GS market, I would say this has no more vibration than the GS, possibly less. The only thing you don't get, obviously, with this is the slightly less ground clearance. But then again, you watch YouTube videos of people throwing this around. I think for the average rider, unless you're a specialist, then that wouldn't bother you. I guess if you're a specialist, you'd be buying a specialist bike anyway. So, but on the road, I think this would be a very, very good alternative to the GS. So I think I need to reflect on this, but in my thinking, am I moving away from the 1000 XT, which from my armchair seemed like an ideal solution? The pendulum is swinging again. Decisions, decisions. Oh, the other negative I think on this bike is the seat. It's a lovely bright yellow colour, but I've got to say it's not as comfortable as the 650, which supported the small of my back better. And if you're a gentleman of a certain age, then you might have a back injury. My back's not particularly strong, I need to look after it. And compared with the RT, there's no comparison. The RT was far more comfortable than this. In terms of the seating position. In terms of the riding position's fine, it's very comfortable. Arms, legs. So here and I wouldn't say the bike feels rough, but it doesn't certainly feel smooth. Let's change up to fourth. You see, fourth now, it feels like it's slightly smoother, but it feels like the engine is not so much labouring, but you get the impression that it's not at its happiest at 40 miles an hour, in the sense that it's not, you know, you can feel oscillations, vibration and so forth. Whereas when the XT was at 40 miles an hour, it just felt like a little sewing machine, really. So maybe the word to describe this, the engine on this is slightly coarser. That's probably unfair, but in comparison to the XT, the 650 XT, and in comparison maybe with the 1200 RT as well, but I prefer this engine over the 1200GS. So you probably have to ride them all. You see, when you do that, it picks up beautifully. See now, 64 miles an hour, indicated 5th gear. That just feels very smooth. That's probably what I call the sweet spot. Again, I've not really had opportunity to sit at motorway speeds today, but I would say that even at this speed, at the sort of 60s, did the 650 XT feel smoother? Maybe it did. And certainly the BMW R1200RT does. Recording with the Ghost GS, you can see this little gadget on my arm here, flashing away in red. That means it's recording. I should have mentioned both bikes, the 650 XT and the 1000 XT, have low speed clutch assist, and essentially what that means is it actually makes it quite hard for you to stall. Not impossible, but again, for a coming back to biker, or a less confident biker, or someone who's changing gear round town all the time biker, again, it's just another little thing, makes your life a bit easier. So, decisions. Remember, this is the bike, the 4-week bike shoot-off or play-off. The 1200GS BMW, the 1200RT BMW, the 650 XT Vstrom, the 1000 XT Vstrom. So the GS BMW's already bitten the dust. Nice bike, but not for me. The RT, as you know if you've seen the video, I absolutely loved. Felt so easy, you know, for someone who's, I think at that time, spent 4, 5, 6 hours on a bike in 37 years. All of those in the last couple of weeks or so. Again, just approaching this junction, and it's probably my cack-handedness, but I'm just aware that at smaller speeds, the throttle on this 1000 XT is very sensitive to ups and downs. It's probably my lack of skill, but I've got to say, on the BMW RT and on the 650 XT, I didn't notice that. It's almost like the throttle feels quite digital, really. It's either, seems to be, I wouldn't say full on or full off, again that's too harsh, but it's just an observation. So in a straight shoot off between this and the BMW 1200 RT, it's the RT. It's obviously more expensive to buy, more expensive to operate, but not by an awful lot, because remember, I'm not buying new BMW, I'll be buying 2.5 years old, something around the 5,000 mile mark. with all the kit on it. And once you buy one of these, the 1000 XT, and you put say 1,500, 2,000 pounds worth of kit on it to bring it to a similar technical standard of gadgetry to the BMW, then, as I discussed in the previous videos, you're up around the £10,500 mark, for which you can buy that BMW, give or take. If you're in the position that I'm in, I strongly recommend you ride them all. I'm probably teaching Granny to suck eggs, but I would ride them all. See, for me, this is a, I've been building up to this for probably 5 years now, thinking about it, buying the occasional bike magazine, watching the Isle of Man TT on the telly. ITV4's excellent coverage, frightened me to death watching that. But then bumped into a group of old bikers at a pub in Oxfordshire about 6 months ago, and I think they basically infected me with their enthusiasm. And ever since then I thought, yeah, something I want to do. So, as you know, the route back was buy the gear, do a back to biking course, and do some test rides, and do an awful lot of armchair research. Been very helpful to all concerned.